بکەین پێش من ناخۆشە هەدینی نووسێ ئێستا من دەکرێت من کاک ئارام
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's event titled A Political Rupture in Palestine, hosted by the WITS History Workshop in conjunction with the Afro-Middle East Center, the Center for Education, Rights and Transformation, the WITS Palestine Solidarity Committee, as well as the South African BDS Coalition. My name is William Shoki. I'm from the WITS Palestine Solidarity Committee, as well as the SABDS Coalition. And we are very excited to be joined this afternoon by Abaher El-Saka, as well as Leila Soura, who I'll introduce in a moment. But before I do that, I just want to remind everyone that today's event is being recorded. So if you are demonstrating your video or when the Q&A happens and you unmute, please be mindful of the fact that you are being recorded. And the usual ground rules do apply. So in the chat, please be cordial and diplomatic. And if anyone attempts to derail today's event or is behaving uncomradely, we will promptly sort of evict you from the event. So to begin today's proceedings, today's seminar responds to the ongoing crisis in Palestine. I'm sure many of us are aware of the events that took place over the last 2 weeks, beginning with Palestinians living in the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah rising up to respond to the threat of eviction by the Israeli state and the subsequent resistance that prompted in the West Bank, Gaza, and across historic Palestine, as well as the brutality from the Israeli state, which that prompted. So the purpose of today's seminar is to ask, what does the current crisis mean? Is it any different to the struggles that have played out before? Or is there something new to the local dynamics, the organizing, the politics, and the global geopolitical context? So this afternoon's speakers are going to tackle these questions by examining the recent history of negotiations and compromises in Palestine, Hamas's strategy, and the nature and dynamics of Palestinian resistance today. So we will have our two speakers speak. We'll have Abaher first, followed by Leila, and then we will also have time for question and answer. So please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat, or when the opportunity arises, to raise your hand to ask a question. So our two speakers for this afternoon are going to be Abaher El-Saka as well as Leila Surah. Abaher is a Palestinian sociologist. He has a PhD in sociology from the University of Nantes in 2005. He was a researcher and lecturer at the University of Nantes from 1998 to 2006, and is currently a professor at Birzeit University in the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences. His current research focuses on the social history and the historiography of the social sciences. He has written and researched artistic modes of expressions, social and collective memory, social identity, and protest movements. And he recently published Gaza, A Social History Under British Colonial Rule from 1917 to 1948 with the Institute for Palestine Studies in Beirut, Lebanon in 2018. Leila is a research fellow at OMAM at the Free University of Brussels. She holds a PhD from Sciences Po in Paris in political sciences and has written on Hamas's foreign policy. She publishes extensively in police forces in the Middle East, Palestinian political forces, as well as Hamas. So we will have Abaher speaking first for about 15 to 20 minutes, followed by Leila for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will have question and answers. So thank you to both speakers who have agreed to participate in the seminar, and we look forward to their inputs. So Abaher, I hand it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. First of all, allow me to express my happiness and gratitude for participation in this webinar, especially since it's organized by organization and association in a country dear to our heart, and which we own many lessons in struggle, community resistance, and historical relation between us. And also I would like to express all my gratitude for Maturi and for you also, William Shoki, and to Lara Farid and all the other colleagues. In the beginning, I'm needless to remind you that the latest Israeli aggression on Gaza Strip few days ago, which killed 254 martyrs, including 69 women and 73 children, and demolished completely dozens of buildings and towers in Gaza, and displaced 53,000 citizens from their home, and strike the infrastructure, destroying street, electricity, and water systems. The continuous siege of Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood and expansion of the target circle of to exclude the Silwan neighborhood also, where thousands of people are also treated with expulsion from their home. And the city of arrested continues in 48 in Israel, which totaled nearly to 1,800 Palestinians until this moment. Now I try to analyze what the new in this movement. This movement come as a result of the blockage of horizontal and of failure of the political project led by the Palestinian Authority, and practice and party also, and political party, to comfort the settler colonial project and its consequences on the ground, especially the systematic policy of Judaization of Jerusalem, expelling residents and withdraw the residency. Maybe I just remind you that Israeli from 48 until now, they expelled 160,000 Palestinians from Jerusalem. And Sheikh Jarrah series is one of this expression of the ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and colonial replacement, and also is the result of discriminatory practice in 48 area and failed Israelization project and destroyed the climb of coexistence among the majority that wants to pass a national state of Jewish race and expenses of the indigenous people. So what how do we understand this movement and what is the new in them? This movement come after a long period of shy participation in public space. After 15 years of division and slacking of official political discourse, preventing it from widespread protest and narrowing to its minimum limit of maintain of movement in Palestinian public space. So this form of mobilization, we can consider it as reoccupation of public space and preventing the authority from dominating and continuing it. The current movement began with an organized offered by the Committee of People of the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, which is a Jerusalemite neighborhood located in the east of the city, inhabited by Jerusalemite family who came from the west of the city and other Palestinian cities and villages and have been living in the neighborhood since 1950. In this, in the 70s, settlers organization ordered the evacuation of this neighborhood, claiming that the land where the housing was established belonged the Jews before the establishment of State of Israel and before the occupation of east part of Jerusalem in 67. Of course, there is no, it's not true because the family reside in this in public land, which the Jordanian government, in agreement with UNRWA, guaranteed to them in exchange to giving up the refugee card and renouncing their refugee status. So this family built and inhabited these houses from 74 years ago. The neighborhood committee went ahead and organized protest that coincided with the Israeli policy of prevention and suppression of assaultation of youth in front of the old city wall of Jerusalem. These events soon spread into the clash and sparkled movement in the all of Palestine and also in diaspora, as eventually form a public opinion case. This movement re-centralizing Jerusalem in the heart of the conflict, ending the marginalizing of Jerusalem and its residents, and restoring respect of youth and daily act of protest, and creating a new form of engagement, a large part of which has to do with the challenging of preventing and the entry to Al-Aqsa Mosque in reclaiming the right to be present in the front of the wall of the old city. And this was overlap between the basic demand and also with the political act. What are the sociological observations drawn from this field? Firstly, it's a historical twist where for the first time since 1976, the Palestinians united in the form of unified protest, starting from the 48 area, joined with other faction on May 18. Therefore, we are facing what comes after 18, which is the difference from all previous movement, because the current movement cancel out of fragmentation and eliminates the difference that were created by the colonial project and the apartheid regime, in the sense that it allows taking the form of social movement in the 4 regions, I mean Gaza, West Bank, and 48, and also diaspora, with unified slogan and with a reconsideration of Palestine 74 years ago. This is a drop of the idea of two-state solution from the level of civil movement. We can say that this movement is a cross-generation, cross-sectarian, and cross-party also. We can say also that the political forces tried to own the movement, but they failed due to the decline of the influence of political faction and their ability to mobilize and their ability to convince large group of youth, of young people with their rhetoric and their practice. This movement is led by a new youth group that use social media tools as part of an organized battle, and used unconventional channel such as TikTok, for example, which brought young people into the tweet circle with their new sample language and form of expression, in some cases using insults and sarcasm to express themselves. In addition to that, a new youth icon and various social media platform focus on the live broadcast from the field and presenting a violation directly, and showing the challenge, resilience, and cross-national interaction of the fragmentation colonial geography, which reached by the diaspora and the whole of the world. This is an entry of an additional actors, such as well-known model like Bella Hadid, like world celebrities and journalists in solidarity of Palestinians. This movement restored the consideration of Palestinian cause and the restoration of public space as the West Bank witnessed many forms from protest since the absence of the late Arafat. The civil discourse can be considered to be a unitary discourse, and the Palestinian society witnessed the debate about the feasibility of rocket in mass battle, but this debate quickly ended, and the missiles were dealt with as a form of resistance, imposing a new rule of awareness and trying to create a rivalry in the battle with the colonizer. On the protests themselves, there is a routine of protesting through a permanent sit-in in the logic of Charles Tilly and defending issue related to housing and people, but behind it, a struggle against the anti-colonial project. That is the struggle. I have to finish here. Okay. So yeah, this I will finish. This do this movement establish a new stage of this form, the previous one? Yes, indeed. We are in the stage of a symbolic victory for the resistance, and the ceasefire came unilaterally by Israel and achieved nothing by destruction, demolition, and displacement of thousands of Palestinians. Maybe I can stop here and take your question and remark after to not abuse your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Abaher. If you've just joined us, you would have been hearing Abaher El-Saka, who's a Palestinian sociologist who's currently a professor at Birzeit University, and we look forward to hearing more from you in the Q&A. I'd now like to welcome Leila Sura, who is a research fellow at Oman at the Free University of Brussels. Over to you, Leila.
Wait, is it okay now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, Abaher, for your presentation. I'm very happy to be part of the seminar today with you. Hello, everyone. I wanted first to thank Mathieu for his invitation. I'm very happy to be part of this panel and to share with you some insights on the current situation in Palestine. My presentation today will be focusing on Hamas, particularly its role during the last confrontation with Israel. I would like to present how recent events have promoted changes in Hamas strategy, although these changes are also the result of a continuous process that goes back to the last decade. So in the introduction, I shall start asking why a new aggression against Gaza. One can first notice that, as it was the case during military operation in 2009, 2012, 2014, the latter offensive has occurred in a specific context, a change in the US administration, the rapprochement between Palestinians, but also context of electoral election in Israel. Since the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, has decided to cancel the holding of election at the end of April, the Palestinian rapprochement was not worrying Israel anymore. What seems to count more is the context of political crisis in Israel following the fourth legislative elections organized in less than 2 years. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appears incapable of forming a government. So the pretext of an Islamic threat at the borders enables him to form a national unity around him and postpone the formation of a government by imposing new elections. One should also add to this the context of mobilization in Jerusalem, which has motivated an international campaign of support for families threatened with expulsion in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. Netanyahu then played his favorite cards to empty the file of all political content to make the conflict a sectarian one and a security issue. In just a few days, confrontation moved from Sheikh Jarrah to Al-Aqsa and then to the Gaza Strip. The exacerbation of violence around the Haram al-Sharif and Al-Aqsa Mosque and violence also perpetrated by Israeli police and Jewish radicals should be understood as an invitation for Hamas to enter a military confrontation with Israel. On May the 7th, Israeli soldiers forced their way into the Al-Aqsa Mosque during prayer time in the holy months of Ramadan. Faced with an extensive use of force in the third holiest Muslim site, Hamas could not remain silent. In a communique dated May the 10th, the spokesman of the Al-Qassam brigades, Abu Ubaidah, has warned that if the violence in Al-Aqsa and Sheikh Jarrah did not cease, the Islamist movement would have no other option than to take the initiative. Nevertheless, Netanyahu's manipulation of the conflict cannot hide the existence of aims that are specific to Hamas, including competing with the President Mahmoud Abbas. Regarding this, people often speak of an objective alliance between Israel and Hamas. Since this type of analysis also relevant, risk understating the manner in which armed struggle allows Hamas to impose itself as an unavoidable player on the national, regional, and international stage, independently from the rivalry with Ramallah. So my presentation will first begin showing how this military struggle allows Hamas to emphasize the discredit affecting Mahmoud Abbas by regaining legitimacy among Palestinians. Then showing in a second part how Hamas, by being successful in imposing a new ratio of force when confronting Israel, can also present itself as a driving force behind national unity, gathering all the Palestinian factions. These two factors have allowed Hamas to become a central player on both the regional and international stage, particularly in this new context of massive uprisings among Palestinians, including those pre-1967 borders. Hamas is also aware of what seems to be a shift in Western public opinion towards Israel, condemning war crimes, and the rise of criticism within Western political elites, especially in the US. I will conclude arguing how those changings could be, in a short term, favorable to Hamas policy. Military option has often allowed Hamas to try to compete with Ramallah. For instance, the military operation of Hamas during the military participation of Hamas during Operation Cast Lead at the end of in December 2008 and January 2009 could be explained as an attempt to delegitimize Mahmoud Abbas, who was ready to sign an agreement with Ehud Olmert in conformity with Annapolis Summit. Also, the military operation Pillar of Defense of November 2012 against Gaza was for Hamas a way to bypass popular support for Mahmoud Abbas, while on November the 29th, the latter was about to seek recognition for Palestine at the UN as a non-state member. The last show of force by Hamas occurs when Mahmoud Abbas has announced at the end of April the cancellation of Palestinian parliamentary elections planned for May the 22nd. using as a pretext Israel banning of polls in East Jerusalem. While the Palestinian Electoral Commission has ensured the setting up of alternative voting stations, this decision was seen as a betrayal by Palestinians. They interpreted it as an ultimate attempt by President Abbas to remain in power, while Fatah was exposing its internal divisions with 3 competing lists running for elections. Regarding Hamas, the cancellation of electoral process has put an end to a long series of negotiations between Salah al-Aruri, the vice president of Hamas Political Bureau, and Jibril Rajoub, secretary of Hamas Central Committee. Signed in September 2020, this agreement has led to the conclusion of a reconciliation agreement between all Palestinian factions, but also a compromise between Fatah and Hamas that highlighted Hamas' abstention from presidential election, but allowed its participation in the renewal of the PLO, Palestinian National Council. Although Hamas was not sure to win the parliamentary election, discussion on a possible joint list with Fatah are proof of this. It was betting, however, on its integration within the PLO. Therefore, this cancellation is a huge blow for Hamas. Rejected from the ballot box, Hamas could then use military means to reaffirm its legitimacy on the Palestinian political stage. Hamas has often been criticizing when using armed struggle to defend only its partisan agenda. In the past, its wait and see attitude as regards the fate of Palestinians from the West Bank and Jerusalem had often been criticized. During the crisis of electronic politics, for instance, in Jerusalem in summer 2017, Hamas had not reacted. Its detractors inside Fatah had often accused Hamas of launching rockets for the sole reason of obtaining a softening of Gaza blockade. Thus, through this operation, Hamas has taken an opportunity to link Gaza to the rest of Palestine. And this is a major change. While in the last years, armed struggle has been used to seize the Gaza blockade, defending Jerusalem has become an integral part of Hamas' political program, not only in discourses, but also in practice. In his communiqué, Abu Obaida had already stated that provocations in Jerusalem were equivalent to aggressions against Palestinians, all Palestinians. On May the 15th, Khaled Meshal himself, the actual president of Hamas outside leadership, gave several conditions for a ceasefire, among which the pulling out of Israeli soldiers from the esplanade of mosque and of settlers from Sheikh Jarrah. Very quickly, after the first firing of rockets, Ismail Haniyeh gave a long speech, essentially focusing on Jerusalem, linking the fates of Al-Quds, Gaza, and Sheikh Jarrah. The hundreds, thousands of rockets launched towards Jerusalem in its campaign called The Sword of Jerusalem shows that it is no more rhetorical posturing. Although the Islamic movement had always claimed this nationalist identification, one should emphasize here the importance of the new context of mobilization in Jerusalem and the general uprising of Palestinians in the West Bank and Israel. In Ramallah, for instance, some 10,000 people were organizing marches toward the settlement of Beit El, a protest that went beyond those of the Second Intifada. By positioning itself as the only protector of holy sites in Jerusalem, this operation allowed Hamas to gain unsuspected legitimacy and to present itself as a resistant movement willing to use armed struggle to defend all Palestinians beyond borders created by Israel. In any case, Hamas benefits from the almost unanimous Palestinian support of favor of the resistance and the firing of rockets, as shown by Hamas flags raised on the esplanade of mosque, but also chiefs of the armed struggle, such as Marwan Isa, Mohammed Deif, are now considered as nationalist leaders. This renewed popularity does not imply ideological or partisan adherence. One must here distinguish support for armed struggle to identification with Hamas. There are many Palestinians who disagree with Hamas from an ideological viewpoint, but who nevertheless adhere to the notion of resistance. More than total agreement with Hamas, this unity should be understood as a support for the resistance. I shall now move to my second part, in which I will try to show how in the meantime armed struggle enables Hamas to present itself as a leading force to threaten national unity. Hamas' ability to impose a ratio of force towards Israel is not new. Already during the 2014 Protective Age operation, Hamas had managed to cause Israeli casualties thanks to its tunnels. And this operation ended also with the first firing of rockets towards Jerusalem. The arrival of Yahya Sinwar to power in 2017, in the wake of the March of Return in the Gaza Strip, had also allowed Hamas to engage in a new strategy of dissuasion against Israel. The diversification of the means of armed struggle through the launching of balloons had forced Israel to accept part of the Islamic movement demands, in particular, the payment of civil servants by Qatar. While part of this renewed military strategy, this last confrontation had surprised Israel by its scope. 4,300 rockets were fired, in particular between May the 12th and May the 16th, and took aim at the very heart of Israeli territory. The Sword of Jerusalem is therefore an opportunity for Hamas to expose its military arsenal, its drones, but also its 15 different types of rockets capable of reaching targets at more than 300 kilometers. This dissuasive capacity, which appears as all the more important since Gaza is under blockade, should of course be seen in the context of the uprising of Palestinians in Israel, which has placed civilians and military authorities in a state of emergency, as we have seen in the city of Lida, for instance. So, although it is still difficult to speak about a victory because the ratio of force is always asymmetrical and largely in favor of Israel, by firing thousands of rockets, Hamas has succeeded in surprising Israel. Despite the imbalance of ratio of power, the armed factions in Gaza have proven capable of imposing a dissuasion. Without any doubt, there is a U-turn that makes victory, under brackets, more concrete than during previous operation. From day one of operation, Haniyeh has demanded a ceasefire, and after 10 days, Israel finally was forced to concede the ceasefire due to the US pressure behind the scenes. According to Osama Hamdan, the ceasefire would also have implied, on behalf of Israel, a series of concessions, including the cessation of incursion in Al-Aqsa, and also the abrogation of the decision of expelling Palestinians' family from Sheikh Jarrah. Nevertheless, the wave of arrests in the West Bank and Jerusalem during the last days would tend to mitigate the impact of these concessions. Far from being the monopoly of Hamas only, this agenda is shared by the entire set of political armed factions in the Gaza Strip. In the conflict, Hamas is not alone, but is supported by all Palestinian factions in Gaza. Its military branch is part of the Common Chamber of Military Operation, which is called in Arabic Al-Ghurfa al-Mushtaraka, that merged all factions. Created in 2018, this chamber groups 12 factions, including Islamist faction, but also leftist and Fatah brigades. And this is in the name of this chamber that Abu Ubaidah has actually made its ultimatum to Israel. Ismail Haniyeh also insisted in his speech on the strategic dimension of this battle, a gateway to the formation of a common Palestinian home and the refundation of the PLO around a unified political program. It is thus Mahmoud Abbas who appeared as the only person responsible for the failure to form national unity. And compared with previous operations, there is no need to paint Abbas as a traitor. The Palestinian president is already weak, is already totally discredited, incapable of responding to Israeli aggression against Palestinians. And it is thus its entire program of negotiation and collaboration with Israel that is now in check, while Hamas' agenda of resistance appears to be the order of the day. To conclude, we can say that both the new popular legitimacy regained by Hamas and the movement's ability to unify all Palestinian factions have enabled Hamas to appear as a major political player. Since 2006, after its election victory, Hamas has forcefully tried to regain recognition despite the blockade and its labelization as a terrorist movement. Yet, it seems that the idea of talking to Hamas as a way to solve Palestinian division has been normalized. In 2015, already, the former British minister Tony Blair had already visited Khaled Mesh'al in Qatar, and now an increasing number of Western politicians have raised the issue of the efficiency of resuming negotiation with Mahmoud Abbas while simultaneously ignoring Hamas. Even Angela Merkel has recently declared that she was favorable opening indirect talks with Hamas. So to answer the general question you've raised on the seminar announcements, is this crisis different from the previous one? I would say that regarding Hamas, the last confrontation is part of a dissuasive strategy towards Israel initiated in 2017 following the March of Return and the arrival of Yahya Sinwar in power, and also part of a discursive narrative elaborated in the new charter, also published in 2017, in which the movement emphasized the importance of enrolling armed struggle in the legal frame of international law. And we can say that nowadays, Hamas aims at presenting armed struggle as a legitimate tool, seeking to follow the same path as Fatah in the 1970s. Yeah. But definitely, Hamas was surprised by the massive uprisings in the West Bank and also, of course, in Israel. And thus, the movement has taken the opportunity to redefine this strategy in a new context that seemed to be particularly in favor of the movement. This is how we should understand the intensive rocket launching towards Jerusalem, but also the heart of Israel, even though the movement had often stressed during the last decades on the importance of limiting armed struggle within the 67 borders. I don't know how, can I add something? I don't know how long I've been talking. Is it?
You have about 1 minute left, but if you
1 minute left, but I will keep it for the. I also wanted to give a more a point of view related to internal dynamic inside Hamas, showing how this last confrontation was had also confirmed that Gaza is now the center of Hamas power, while for a long time the external leadership was a major actor regarding decision-making. The balance of power had increasingly been in favor of Gaza, and we can see it during this last confrontation. This shift toward inside Palestine is, of course, the result of both regional changings, the weakness of Hamas leadership abroad after its departure from Syria, but also a reinforcement of the Gaza leadership thanks to its good relation with Iran. And Yahya Sinwar, as I said, arrived in power in Gaza in 2017, had made this shift more concrete. He's the one who made decisions regarding peace and war. And the president of Political Bureau in Qatar, Ismail Haniyeh, is now following Sinwar's strategy. But probably Haniyeh will be re-elected as the president of Hamas, since Sinwar and the Gaza leadership had asked Mish'al to renounce for running in the polls. Mish'al has a long experience in diplomacy. He has also strong ties with the Qataris, and this could weaken Sinwar domination and provoke clashes within the movement.
Thank you very much, Leila, and thanks once again to Abaher. Truly illuminating presentations from the both of you, and I'm seeing a lot of comments reflecting that, and we're deeply appreciative that you've taken the time to speak to all of us today. We'll now move on to the Q&A, where we can hopefully tease out some of the points that you raised and get into them at a greater detail. So a reminder to everyone, if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or to raise your hand as Zoom provides for, and then we will give you the opportunity to ask your question. So whilst you think of potential questions to ask, I'm going to raise one question that was mentioned in the chat. It's to both our panelists today from Sid Luckett. And Sid says that the PKK had a close relationship with the PLO in the early days of Öcalan states in Syria and Lebanon. Can you give an update on the relationship between the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and the Palestinian struggle? So the question is around the Kurdistan struggle and the Palestinian struggle, and what is the state of that relationship today? If either one of you feels comfortable answering that question, please do.
I think I will let Abaher to answer this, because since Hamas has very good ties and relations with Turkey, I guess the movement doesn't want to damage these relations. So I think Abaher has maybe more details, maybe regarding the Palestinians in the West Bank.
Yeah, the relation between Palestinian faction and PKK in the past was very strong, because they fight together, especially the leftist party. But since the situation become complicated, because the part of Palestinian leftist group defends the Syria, and the part of PKK against Syrian regime is very complicated. And for the moment, I think the majority of Palestinian still have all the sympathy for the Kurd in general, and also for this party. But the relation between Palestinian faction and Öcalan party become complicated, because this relation between Palestinian movement, especially the left, and the regime of Assad, and also because Hamas, as Leila mentioned, has very good relation with Ankara. So and for Erdogan, it's something like conditional to have a good relation with Hamas. Without this relation with Öcalan and all these Kurd party. Do you hear me? I think
It looks like Will, sorry, I'm just taking over because it looks like Will might have frozen. While we wait for Will to come back online, I see Noor has a question. Noor, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, great. I hope you can hear me. Thanks very much to both the speakers. Your contributions have been extremely valuable and insightful, particularly as Aisha and Sid have commented in the chat. It allows those of us who are reasonably close watchers of what's going on in Palestine to have a better understanding of the political landscape. And it reminds us of the labels that were attached to the liberation movements in South Africa, particularly that of terrorists, in order to delegitimize those movements. It is understandable that the focus of parts of your intervention has been on the existing political organizations, movements, PLO, Hamas, and the different factions that constitute those two. My question really is about the movements outside Hamas and PLO. And when we ask the question about what is different in the current moment and in the current struggles, what can you tell us about other movements? I'm loath to call them social movements, but for want of a more accurate label, perhaps we can use that. And what role have those movements played? And they may be, civil society, youth organizations, women's organizations, religious organizations. I would be particularly interested to know whether there are any kind of trade unions that have played any role in the current wave of struggles, and whether, in your interpretation, those movements are contributing differently to the reconfiguration of politics in Palestine and in the different parts. I think it may have been either Leila or Abaher who raised the kind of four kind of spatial dimensions of Palestine. And I wonder how those also affect the nature of these movements. Thanks very much.
Thanks for that question, Noor. And I'll add to that, how do we make sense of the general strike which happened, who organized that, and how does it figure into all of the dynamics that Noor was pointing to? There's a question from Mathieu. I think we'll let Mathieu ask their question, and then we'll give you both the opportunity to answer both those questions.
Jumping on the question from Noor, it's more about the form of the mobilizations. Do you witness on the ground some kinds of local committee or those kinds of units that may organize the protest, I mean, in Sheikh Jarrah or elsewhere in West Bank or Gaza? And also, I mean, all international attention focused on the ceasefire, but then what's going on the ground? If there's any call for protest, if there's any things we are continuing, or for the moment, all the actors are just waiting to see what will be the next steps.
Thank you, Mathieu. I'll give the panelists an opportunity to answer both of those questions.
As you give me the floor before, go Leila now, before me.
Do you want me to start, Abaher?
Yeah.
I think Abaher must have a lot to say about the role of local committees, trade unions, maybe in the West Bank, because the situation in Gaza is very different, is difficult, first of all, because of the blockades and because of Hamas domination of in the Gaza Strip, which makes this local committees more difficult to intervene. So I will maybe say something about the new support for Palestine. It seems like the Palestinian cause has expanded among the regional but also international public opinion. And for me, it seems like this support is no longer something restricted to leftist activists, but has been extended to mainstream individuals. So not only to people affiliated with to political parties. We can notice also that the influence, not only the African, I mean, the apartheid paradigm, but also the post-colonial paradigm within political, cultural, institutional fields in the Western's democracy could explain this shift. We've noticed that defending Palestinians has become the same as defending any discriminated people, such as African Americans or sexual minorities. So within this global framework, the Palestinians have gained popularity, I think, since it is now very difficult to adopt this anti-colonial paradigm without, while continuing ignoring the Palestinians. So we've seen, like, for instance, that several LGBT, for instance, have raised recently slogans saying that Israel shouldn't take advantage of their status when oppressing Palestinians at the same time. So it's a way to answer your question, I think, but maybe I will let Abaher come back to maybe the local Palestinian scene.
Yeah, thank you, Leila. I will try to answer the three questions. The first one about the social movement and the union. In fact, we observed in the field in Palestine from maybe 10 years now that there is something like disengagement in political parties. So people, they are so politicized, not engaged in political party. And I think it's something universal now in the world. There is many people try to do politics outside of political party, and also for the union. The union, for example, because the majority of the syndicate in Palestine organized by political parties, especially in Fatah and Hamas, and a party of Popular Front. Many of small groups, small union try to do social movement, social mobility against Palestinian policy and economic and political issues. So we can see that actually if we looking deeply the movement in the streets, we can find many people from syndicate, from political party, but participated in action and repertory of action in Palestine now as Palestinian, not as Fathawi or militant of Hamas. Or so we can see that and there is a new reconfiguration of Palestinian politics and Palestinian movement, because as I tried to say in my intervention, there is a weakness of Palestinian faction. The project conducted by the Palestinian Authority not worked. The project of two-state solution is not in the plus d'actualité, it's not on the on time now. So many people try to do connection, réseau of solidarity out of political party. For the second question about the strike, what we observed in the field that it's a start in 48 with this Haute Committee of Palestinian 48, and they decide to do something grave, something strike, we call it national strike, and in 3 hours, all Palestinian faction accept the deal and they work together. And this is in this way, this is a new stage start in Palestine, because this way it's mean all these division fragmented between 48 and West Bank and Gaza was eliminated. Symbolically, and I think for this reason we can observe in the trend that we have a new form of mobilization, a new form of organization conducted by youth, very young youth. I saw something I never saw before, in fact, that we have very young people, like children, do video in TikTok and do just a small video to demonstrate some suffering. And if we looking deeply all this debate in the Palestinian Authority, we are in post Oslo, and we are post two-state solution. Palestinians now they reclaim that we are one people, one nation. We don't accept more this division, and the Palestinians think that all the slogan in the past now written back. I mean, people say all this Palestine the same, and if we look to the discourse of Sinwar yesterday in Gaza, I observed that Sinwar was very nationalist yesterday. It's strange because this guy has a new vocabulary from nationalistic rhetoric. So he glorified Arafat, Fatah, and all these political party, and he was in the logic of unity. And this new order, it came from the ground. People reclaim the end of the division. Of course, the political party, they are in, so they protect their interest and their, of course, their man. For this reason, I think we can think that actually we enter in the new configuration of different type of mobilization in Palestine, and it's on form. It's not formed now, so we have to wait for 2-3 weeks to see where we go. For the question of Matthew about the continuous, I have to say something very rude, but I have to do this. Palestinian Authority is the obstacle of all mobilization in Palestine. Palestinian Authority want to preserve the status quo. It's mean negotiation, have the benefit of all these issues in the world now. The American, the Egyptian, the German, the French came to Ramallah to discuss with Mahmoud Abbas as interlocutor, and it wasn't the case 2 months before. So Palestinian Authority tried to use the same way as representative of Palestinian Authority, Palestinian society, but in fact, there is, as Leila mentioned in her intervention, the Palestinian Authority, they are the burden. Nobody support the Palestinian Authority, and Mahmoud Abbas, in particularly, he lost all popularity in Palestine. So to answer Matthew's question, I think now in the ground, there is many committee in 48, many, like thousands of small groups. They work together, they organize a strike, they organize demonstration. And we have the same in West Bank, and especially in Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is the main central of mobilization. We have all these small groups in Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan. They organize always manifestations. So I think this group will maintain the status of not intifada, but political and social mobility in Palestinian society for the moment. I think for the moment.
Thank you very much to both of you for those answers. Yeah, more important insights. We'll take another round of questions. I'll begin with one that's in the chat from Aisha, who says that one area of heightened concern for many of us outside is the health situation in Gaza, particularly what appears to be a deliberate targeting of the COVID and other specialists and experts, and the deliberate attempt to demolish civilian residences, which must inevitably lead to the type of crowding that will result in the spread of COVID and other illnesses and spreading like wildfire. Is this a new type of ethnic cleansing, or is that too harsh, is the question.
Thank you for, should I answer this one, or do you want to take another one before? Because I just seen is Noor, perhaps, no.
Yes, there's a follow-up question, which I think is I think it's comparing the resurgence of groups inside Palestine, if that's comparable to the resurgence of groups inside South Africa during the anti-apartheid movement, which resulted in the United Democratic Front. So I think it's to do with whether or not we're seeing the formation of a United Democratic Front or a similar like organization in Palestine. And then there's another question from Yusuf, which says that in the regulation and control of food and caloric intake, the stunting, the targeting and killing of health personnel, the bombing of health facilities, the harvesting of organs of Palestinian prisoners, the experiments in failure to release the bodies of these prisoners, the targeting of Palestinians during their reproductive years is more than medical apartheid, in addition to the denial of vaccines. So I think in addition to the question asked by Aisha about whether or not health is now being used as a new site for ethnic cleansing.
Yes, of course, we should notice that this last confrontation, aggression against Gaza has occurred in a context after post-COVID, or we still have a lot of COVID in Gaza. So yes, we should mention this difference comparing to the previous operations. And also notice the fact that Israel has targeted not only civilians, not only the media also, we've noticed, but also roads, like main roads leading to hospitals and medical centers. So yes, it's part of a strategy to threaten the Palestinian people of Gaza, of course. But the thing is, talking about ethnic cleansing, we've seen a lot in the questions, like the mention of apartheid, ethnic cleansing, genocide. There is a lot of, this terminology. It makes sense if you want to portray the Palestinian cause as, like, make comparison and make this cause more efficient within the international stage. Of course, it's useful to use this as a militant, when you want to defend the Palestinians, you have to be efficient in those kind of slogans. But actually, ethnic cleansing, I don't know if it's really relevant to talk about this regarding Gaza, because the ethnic cleansing is supposed to put outside the borders, like the Palestinians, as if for instance it was the case in Lebanon. In Lebanon, after the Sabra and Shatila massacre in 1982, the UN has labeled this massacre as a genocide, actually, because it seems that some Lebanese wanted to put all the Palestinians outside Lebanon. So this is how they portray it, as a genocide. But regarding ethnic cleansing, I would say that in Gaza, Israelis they don't want to come back to Gaza. It's really different from the West Bank. They want to occupy the West Bank. They want, all this Judée-Samarie become part of Israel, and it's kind of the opposite. The Gaza Strip, they don't want to deal with the Gaza Strip anymore. So the Palestinians should stay in this part of Palestine, and that's it. So I think ethnic cleansing, it doesn't really, it's not really relevant concerning the Gaza Strip. And just to say a few words concerning Sinwar, and what Abaher said about Sinwar is very interesting. Actually, we can see that Sinwar, since he arrived in power in 2017, he has tried to gather a lot of young Palestinians around him, because as a smart move, he understood that, like, being close to the youth in Gaza, and he used them as like kind of tool to mobilize also social media, because he understood that using social media has become, a prerogative, like something really important. So it's not again totally new for Hamas strategy in Gaza, but we've seen this really efficient during the last crisis. And also TikTok is very important to talk about TikTok, of course, because if we look at social media as mainstream, like Facebook, we know that, like, there is a lot of surveillance and control under Facebook. We've seen, like, Zuckerberg, he has deleted a lot of posts for defending the Palestinians. He had deleted also events regarding the Palestinian cause. So of course, those kind of social media used by very, very young people, like 15, 12 years old, is very important to, bypass all the surveillance strategy imposed by Facebook, Twitter, also WhatsApp and Instagram, of course. And second point, and I will finish there, this social media, of course, is a new way to impose a narrative, which is very different from the narrative we see before, because the one who is looking at the video is actually living the same situation as the Palestinians. So it imposed a different way to, you become part of the struggle. You inside with you have the same destiny, the same fate as Palestinians, because you live the situation with there. So this is, and then I will let Abaher to answer the second question on, yeah, it's not relevant to Gaza. I'm reading the question. It's not relevant in Gaza. It depends how you define ethnic cleansing. If you just want to say that Israel wanted to push out Palestinians from Israel territory, Israel doesn't want to be in Gaza anymore. So this is the only thing I wanted to say. I mean, and then for the rest of Palestine, of course, ethnic cleansing, it means something. I will let Abaher to answer the rest and to give his maybe position about this.
Okay, thank you. About the ethnic cleansing, I think, of course, the colonial project continue to think that they should do ethnic cleansing. But I agree with partially with Layla, but also because the Israelis recently said that we can return back to Gaza as occupation. I mean, not to push people from Gaza outside, because it's very complicated, and Egyptian will not accept that that people moved. And in fact, Palestinian population will not get out of Palestine. I mean, during the aggression against Gaza, the Egyptian opened the borders, and there is few people just get out from Gaza. So people will not get out from their country, because will not repeat the Nakba anymore. So but in the Colonia project, there is a ethnic cleansing, of course in Jerusalem and West Bank, and also in Led, in Haifa, and all these town of Israel. So, but in Gaza is very complicated, because they can't do ethnic cleansing in this area of Palestine. They can reoccupy occupied Gaza Strip, of course, avec all these consequences in the ground. But I don't think that the Israelis want to push Palestinians from Gaza outside, but not because they are I mean, they don't want, but they can't do this in this area, because we have Egypt near them. So it's very complicated.
Thank you. Perhaps maybe we can do one more round of questions before we will have to conclude. I'll start with a question from Laura, who asks, what does the recent crisis mean for the Abraham Accords? Are Hamas and others making overtures to these countries in light of Israel's recent brutalities? Might there be a new regional politics between Palestinians and their neighbors? Or is Israel relying heavily on these countries to maintain their power? And then a question from Suleiman, who says, are there any prospects of Israel changing its policies, or is it just going to be business as usual? And then I'd like to ask a question. I think this question builds off from what Noor and others were contributing earlier. I mean, Abahari, you were saying earlier that we are now living in a post-Oslo paradigm, that a lot of people understand the two-state compromise as being one of normalizing Israeli occupation. I want to ask if that's sort of leading to sort of heightened demand for one democratic state with equal rights for all, or are we not at that stage yet as far as the demands of the mobilization which is currently building?
Shall I start, Layla?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so I will start with this last question. I think first the Israeli cancel the possibility to do two states. There is no places for two states, because the percentage of colony in West Bank have been 10 times more than in Oslo. So there is no places for two states in West Bank, in fact. And people, after 26 of negotiation between Palestinian Authority and Israel, they don't believe at more on two-state solution. And also because this events show us that after 74 years of being residents in Israel, they show that Israelis continue to treat Palestinian in 48 as a Palestinian and as with all this discrimination. You know, now some Israeli responsible, they ask to impose the new law to return back to the mandate period, British mandate period. It's mean the preventive a law who permit the Israeli take the Palestinian for the administrative jail for 6 months, and they want to apply this for Palestinian in 48. It's mean we are in after 74 years after we have the same configuration. For this reason, I think we are in Palestinian dialogue about one state solution, but we have very different position, because we have people who want one democratic, like secular state, and you have also people who want to live together in one state without regardless the nature of state. So we have 3 or 4 forces in Palestine. All of them defends the idea of one solution state, but the majority of Palestinians now, they don't believe on 2 state notion. And I have another question, I think, but I lost. It was about.
Yes, the other question was about the Abraham Accords and whether or not this recent confrontation means that there's a new regional politics between Palestinians and their neighbors, or is Israel going to rely on the relations it's normalized with Arab countries to maintain their power? So has this recent episode changed the nature of the Abraham Accords, or is that going to start to become undone?
I mean, this situation re-centralized the Palestinian causes in the Arab world. I mean, comparing with this recently normalization, and we saw that Jordanian and many countries where Israeli have a relation, people moved and do demonstration. So I think for the moment, all this normalization with Morocco, for example, in Morocco, there is many also demonstration against the escalation on Gaza and against the normalization. I mean, this situation pushed Palestinian and Arabs to rethinking about this normalization between Israel and some Arabic regime. Leila.
Thanks, Abaher. Leila?
Thank you. I totally agree with what Abaher just said about this post-Oslo paradigm, which has been started since decades now. I mean, we've been talking about the post-Oslo, but actually this Oslo has, I mean, for the Palestinians, these two countries solutions, 2-state solutions has been, I mean, for ages now disappeared for regarding the Palestinians. So I would say that yes, this 1-state solution has appeared now. I mean, since many years, several years, people are raising intellectual Palestinian intellectual. Young Palestinian activists, politicians, this 1-state solution. But I agree with Abaher, like this solution is not that easy to implement, because as we just seen during the last weeks, the Palestinians in Israel are suffering from the same colonial rule. So, I mean, imagine one state, the Palestinian would be also, of course, under this discrimination rule imposed by the Israelis. So it's not that easy to talk about one state solution, also because you have two nationalism competing here for ages. I mean, it's not only about discrimination, it's also the Palestinians are struggling for independence. So they won't be, it's not that easy to erase decades of struggling for independence, you know, it is here that the comparison with South Africa ends, you know what I mean? Because of course you had a lot of similarity. Of course, it's useful to use this paradigm for a political purpose, but the two configurations are very different. People are struggling for independence, you know. So it's not only about discrimination, and it's also about having a state, you know, and you cannot delete all this, you know, struggle because of, you know, Israeli purpose and Israeli policies. So I think both solutions are difficult to implement, and I don't have the answer, but I agree with Abaher that the one-state solution it's a kind of utopia, you know, also. And concerning the agreements, for me, those agreements are not really normalization. You know what I mean? We've been using this tadbir, talking about like a kind of normalization with countries that never been into a war with Israel. It's really different. What happened between the peace process have happened between Egypt and Israel, Jordan and Israel, and those countries. They entered into strategic, you know, partnership with Israel for different purpose, but it's not about normalization. That it was, you know, portrayed as normalization because Israel wanted to present it as a kind of, you know, we're making peace like with Arab countries, but it's not about this for me.
Okay, thank you so much to Leila and to Abaher for making the time today. I'm seeing some hearty discussion and debate still ongoing in the chat, but unfortunately we will have to end today's seminar at this point. We really appreciate Leila and Abaher making the time and want to extend our thanks to them once again, as well as to the Wits History Workshop, the Afro-Middle East Center, the Center for Education, Rights and Transformation, as well as the Wits PSC and the SA BDS Coalition for hosting. And thanks to you, our attendees, for asking all of your questions, for engaging in discussion with the panelists. And this is, of course, an ongoing conversation, and we look forward to our continued interaction as we all continue to make our contributions to the Palestinian liberation struggle. A copy of this seminar will be available on YouTube soon. So once that is done, then please share it widely. It's been an extremely informative and insightful seminar, and thanks once again to our panelists.
Thank you.
For their
Thank you
inputs.
very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you once again, and I wish everyone a good afternoon and a good week. And until next time, goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mathieu. Thank you very much.
Thank you.